Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and one of our favorite subjects, economics, back on center stage today.
It is, and it's economics from an interesting perspective. Dr. Jeremy Oller, the head of the economics department at the University of Central Oklahoma, will be joining us. Quite frankly, he is known in the community that deals with matters like this as a rising star. He is a relatively young man, but has great accomplishments and has great skills that litigators and non-litigators alike like to take advantage of. So I think our viewers may start to doze off if they think it's going to be about an economist. You don't do it. You'll find this fascinating, I think.
The economy affects everyone, obviously, and the study of economics is right there at the forefront. Jeremy Oller, today's guest in The Verdict. We'll be right back.
I like the idea of improvisation and starting with not a preconceived idea. All of my work is about visual images taken from my memory. I'm Brenda Kingery. I am an artist and I'm a proud Chickasaw. One time I said, "Oh God, please don't let me die with my paintings in the closet." And what I would want them to be is everywhere. I would want them to be loved, to be used, to be respected. You work your whole life doing this. You just keep going as long as you can. And I have such a good background with a 106-year-old grandmother that I've always thought in my mind I would just paint till I'm 106. My Chickasaw heritage has become a primary part of my life. And the reason is, it's a place I call home.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofenation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we are very pleased to welcome to the set of The Verdict Dr. Jeremy Oller. Dr. Oller is a head of the economics department at University of Central Oklahoma, as indicated in the opening segment. He did his undergraduate work at University of Central Oklahoma. He is also a lawyer, did his law work at the University of Oklahoma, and he's a doctorate, holds a doctorate in economics, and he got that doctorate from the University of Oklahoma. He is an expert in a number of areas, including industrial organization or antitrust work, as well as some other things he'll tell you about. He has written many papers, lectured much about economics and the relevance of it to the citizen's life. I think you'll find his comments and his thoughts very interesting. This is his first visit to The Verdict, and we're sure glad you're here. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, economics is where it's at. Become media stars now. You watch CNBC now. They're always interviewing economics. They're second guessing. It's almost like being a football coach.
Absolutely.
Everybody's trying to second guess what the economists are saying, what the Fed's trying to do.
Well, and everybody's got an economist.
and if it's in the future, everybody can be right. That's one of the kind of like
coins,
sports.
So
is that the way it works?
That is.
Well, tell us about the coins over at UCO. What do you do over in the economics department?
At the economics department, I'm chair of the department, and so I kind of oversee the faculty within the economics department. And when you're the chair of the department, you are engaged more with faculty development. You're also teaching classes, doing research, and also making sure that the department's well planned for the future.
Now, did I pick up in the bio that you have a doctorate in economics?
I do.
Okay, so what's a kid like that ultimately gets a doctorate? Now, what were you like in middle school Were you into numbers, and were you into to the economics of the time, or did this come to you later on in
I
life?
had a lot of interest as a middle schooler. But economics was always part of it. My passion was always baseball. So I loved watching baseball, playing baseball. But in that, The Economist came out because I started trading baseball cards.
Really?
And I actually I took my lunch money every day, bought baseball cards, and then would save it all up. And I'd start doing shows by the time I was about 15. And I actually had booths at trade shows and was vending.
How cool! So you were a merchant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
That's where the money was at.
Talk to us a little bit about that baseball passion and economics. You did a paper or two on game theory or something. Did you know?
Yeah, one of the projects I did for a class I had
Yeah.
was I created a baseball simulation. So the students in the class, it was for the MBA at the University of Central Oklahoma, and the students in that class had to manage a baseball team. So they made all the kinds of decisions such as pricing, they had to decide how much to sell sodas for, hot dogs, and so I created models that basically just allowed them to make profits or lose money, and they bid on baseball players, and it was just a lot of fun. It turned economics from just a study about prices and quantity into fun and just how to run a business and compete.
Yeah. At the other end of the spectrum is, the speculation about the Fed chairman and interest rates. Do you have any opinions about all of that?
I try to stay away from those areas. That's the brilliant thing about economics is there's so many disciplines and fields within it. So you have the macroeconomists who are watching interest rates and growth rates. You have the microeconomists who look at what I do, which are individual firms' behavior or consumer behavior. And so me firing something out about the interest rate, I would be flipping a coin.
I know one of your areas of expertise is energy. In Oklahoma City alone, when you look at the corporate headquarters and the large energy companies, there are specific business models that have worked or not worked for each individual company in Oklahoma City. I find that fascinating that there's not just one textbook way to run an energy company. Explain, if you can, your area of expertise in that regard.
Wow, it's just looking at the prices and the different types of industries, and as you mentioned, they're just so diverse. I think specifically, if you're talking about corporate models or corporate structures, apparently different ones work different ways. You have some partnership structures that are limited liability, but they're trying to make profit as quick as they can. You have some basic corporate entities that try to basically create capitals, raise shareholder value, and in the end, that's what they all try to do. But there's just different ways, and it relates back to procuring land, whether they're building pipelines or what particular business they're in. There's so many different industries in the state.
Let's talk a little bit about your duties as head of the department at UCO. How long have you held that position?
The chair of the department, I've
Yeah.
been about 2.5 years.
Okay. Has the curriculum has the economics curriculum changed significantly under your leadership?
It's changed substantially because about 1.5 years ago we introduced a new program in energy economics. So that is actually a BBA degree that a student could get.
How many other areas can an economist dabble in? Just approximately. I realize it's an estimate.
Approximately, I would approximately say 30, 40. It could be anything. And it's not like accounting or law where you're being trained for a specific discipline. It's your imagination can really take you different places. If you see how those talents and skills you get learning economics can serve an industry, you can take it anywhere.
I've heard it said they'll give a range of the price of oil, and they'll say that the break-even point is somewhere between here and here. But in Saudi Arabia, it's like next to nothing. How does that work? Why is it so much? Why does the price of energy have to support so much higher here in the United States than it would be in a Middle Eastern company?
It would primarily be the cost of inputs. So you're looking at land acquisition costs, easements, the cost of drilling, the equipment. So it would be all the various inputs. And
So if you own everything, that's a fundamental. That's a good model, like the Saudi Arabian company.
yeah, especially if you're able to acquire it cheap. Absolutely.
How many students do you have in the economics, approximately enrolled in economics as a major?
Currently, we have about 50 as an economics major. We have about 25 as an energy economics major, which I'm really happy with that number because it officially started. Students could really enroll in it about 1 year ago. So we've already attracted 25 new majors.
Well, this was like going home for you, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Oklahoma City.
Ah.
Yeah.
How many students are enrolled in economics classes at UCM?
Well, it depends on the type of class. If it's there's certain classes where we call a core class, meaning you have to have it for any business degree. And those classes are principles of microeconomics and macroeconomics, and they could generally average about 45 students a class. Once you get into the upper division classes and the specific majors, you probably get about 20.
In my undergraduate days, which I barely remember, and I'm not really sure I'm remembering correctly, I remember thinking, oh gosh, I've got to have a 5-hour course in economics because there must be some reason that they had to have 5 hours, and I thought, I'm really going to hate this. And when I got into it, I found it to be, I was in the business school, I found it to be probably the most interesting of all my business classes. Why is that? I mean, is my reaction aberrant, or is that kind of normal?
I think enjoying it depends on the person, but I think it's extremely interesting because
I do too.
It has so many dynamics. And when people hear economics, what they think of commonly might be gross domestic product or inflation.
Yeah.
They think of those big macroeconomic variables, which some people love those too because it's interesting to see how the economy is operating as a whole. But some of the dynamics can be about strategy or game theory, things that make you think how your competitor is responding and what's your best response to what they do. So that's what I consider really engaging is how do you think 2 steps ahead of your competition and how do you assume what they're going to do, and that to me is the fun of it.
Well, there's so many different ways to teach game theory. How do you go about it?
Practically. In my microeconomics class, I create game simulations. And they can be very simple from they have a high-low decision. It's called the prisoner's dilemma,
right?
Where if they all acted together, they would choose a high strategy, but they all have the incentive to cheat on each other, and so they end up choosing low. And that's a simple one that you can do. I have them price electricity in a market setting where the bids are sealed, so the lowest bidder wins however many units they sell, but there's cost associated with it, so they actually have to compete with each other. I've had car auctions. I've done so many different games, the baseball game simulation.
And do they get into it pretty well?
Absolutely. I find it very effective. I think they have fun with it. When I review student evaluations, that's always one of the top mentioned things I enjoy.
Dr. Jeremy Oller is today's guest. He's an economics professor at the University of Central Oklahoma. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Oller right after this.
People have been talking about energy independence for a long time. It's always been popular, but today it's possible.
We have an enormous supply of oil and gas in the United States, much more than we thought just a few years ago.
New technology, massive new discoveries, largely made by Oklahoma companies. It literally changes everything.
And Oklahoma is leading the charge. Go watch this video to see why. Energy independence starts with us.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. We are learning more about economics with Professor Jeremy Oller here on The Verdict. Kent?
Well, Jeremy, I know right out of getting your PhD after having already obtained an undergraduate, an MBA, and a law degree, you didn't jump right into academia, or at least full with both feet. Tell us a little bit about what you have done in the private sector consulting on cases.
Sure. Well, I started because straight out of law school and out of getting a PhD, I intended to be more in the consulting field. And so I ended up doing private consulting work through a firm in Oklahoma City. And we started working on antitrust cases, which involve harms to competition. Basically, to put it in normal terms, a lot of people think of it as big companies doing bad things.
Well, you were there for doing that kind of work almost exclusively, I guess, for some period of time.
Yeah, I was doing that for about 5 or 6 years.
And how many approximately different engagements were you involved in?
Numerous. I'd say specifically I remember that the ones that jump out to you, about 7 or 8, that just really, that are with you for a long time, and that you put a lot of work into them, probably a year, 2 years, and that becomes your life for a period of time.
It's hard to have a high volume of engagements.
Absolutely.
In something that each one takes that long.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the types of industries that you've been engaged in consulting for?
Oh, industries. I've been in the electric distribution industry, so power companies. I've seen damage cases that involve military workers. I've seen retail outlets are common, so gasoline stations, metal shops. I mean, I've seen the whole span of it. And so each time is an opportunity to learn something new about a different industry that you knew nothing about walking into it.
Well, tell our viewers a little bit about what it's like being a testifying economist or consulting economist that has to hit the witness stand.
I think it's wonderful because being a testifying witness involves such preparation. You really have to examine the law, you have to examine the economics, and you have to come up with a very reasonable strategy of what's going on in that market and whether there is a harm or whether there's not. And so most of it's just a lot of hard work at first, and then there's writing reports, and then the fun part begins, which is going to deposition, having attorneys question you, and then being put on the stand. And that's what I think the fun part is, being able to share the story with the jury.
Well, let me ask you this. One thing that's always intrigued me is that a PhD, MBA, lawyer, economist has to be able to talk to usually 6 jurors in terms that the jurors understand. Mm-hmm. In other words, you're not going to be able to say, I want the jury to know that this is an oligopolistic market with a homogeneous product. And stop there. You know, their eyes will start spinning like slot machines. How do you make the proper economic description understandable to a lay jury?
Well, you bring up a great point, and it's something you really have to think about before you go on the stand, or before you're even deposed. And I'll even add while writing a report, because while you're doing all these things, if I use the term cross-elasticity, I can put my loved ones to sleep very fast. So what I want to do is think of examples they can understand. I think of, a little kid opening a lemonade stand. I think of things that people are engaged in their everyday life, and maybe little nuances or things that they don't like, and I try to correlate it back to things they understand. So if they see low prices or high prices and feel like they've been price gouged, try to explain why those things are going on in very simple terms.
But at the same time, your testimony may very well be part of the basis for somebody else's appeal.
Absolutely.
So you've got to make sure that your changing of the character of the words has not changed the character of the meaning.
Absolutely. I've always found just be as straightforward as you can. Don't over elaborate, and say what needs to be said without doing too much, and so that they understand what you're trying to tell them. But the more you ramble on, the more it gets you in trouble.
Has the work of an economist changed over the last, say, 5 to 10 years?
I would say basic economics has not changed, but the industries have changed, and they're constantly changing, and they always will constantly change. You've seen technology change. Here in Oklahoma, everyone sees oil, the oil industry go up and down, the natural gas industry.
Right.
Think about that industry alone in the last 10 years, the horizontal fracture.
I'm interested because a couple of areas of expertise are energy and some on the supply side. You're working with the electricity companies or something like that. All of those involve a lot of government regulation.
Absolutely.
So are we over-regulated in the energy industry and on the utility side?
Difficult question. As a market economist, I say a lot of times there is a lot of overregulation in a lot of circumstances, but it also depends on what exactly is going on. I think when you create laws, you want to create laws. I always tell students that antitrust laws are created basically to take a market that should be competitive, but it's not behaving that way. And so they're there to make sure they do, in fact, behave that way.
Without this regulation, though, it would kind of be supply and demand. We just kind of control those industries. And for some reason, we've determined that's not the best way to do it. But I would think from an economist standpoint, that's what makes it hard. All of a sudden, if it was market forces, you could just kind of watch and observe. But all of a sudden, government's coming in and interfering with the normal process. And then you have to try and figure out, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are they doing too much or not enough?
Generally, I tell people, leave the market alone, because government can only attempt to model the best solution, which is perfect competition. So it can only try to get there. But if there is a market failure, if you have a monopolist and high barriers to entry in the market, or it basically meaning it's hard to get into that market, that's where maybe some government intervention is warranted. But government intervention should always attempt to model the competitive industry.
You've been doing this how many years now?
I would say 10.
Yeah? Do you still have the fascination after 10 years of doing this work with looking into the next industry, looking into the next business that you've never looked into before and learning about it and finding out about it?
I find I have the passion with each case that I had with the first one. Yeah. Everyone's so exciting because you get to learn a new industry. And this part of what I do complements the teaching and being a professor, because now you actually have that practical, hard experience that you can apply and educate students. As I said earlier, where you want to give people practical examples, learning these different industries gives you those tools to articulate, hey, here's what happens in sheet metal, or here's what happens at the retail stores.
Are you ever in a posture when you're in litigation matters, where you're testifying for one side or the other, where part of your duty is to criticize the report of a peer who's the economist on the other side? How do you do that and retain any friends? How does that work?
That task always comes about because there is always going to be an expert on the other side, and they're usually going to be very good. They're going to be just as qualified as you are, and they're trying to prove a different result than you. So I think you don't take it personally. It's an expert opinion, and it's a professional opinion. So you do it with integrity, and you come up with what you believe to be a reasonable economic explanation for what's going on. And I think they're doing the same thing. So reasonable people disagree, as we open the show saying. Economists have different opinions on everything, and that applies in court cases as well.
About a minute left. What's the advent of technology and the increases in technology? How does that affect the teaching side at the UCO Economics School?
It changes it drastically, because when I was a student, you basically had chalkboards and professors lecturing. Now everything's interactive. Students want to see YouTube videos. You can do that in class. I can pull up a video at any given time. There's notes I can disseminate to students right on the bat. I can mark them up, and they'll have them as soon as they leave the classroom. So I think it's really facilitated student learning. I think the thing we got to be careful of as educators is we don't want to substitute it for learning and use technology as a crutch rather than as an enabler.
You do use online courses as well, do you not?
I do.
Yeah. Well, best of luck to you in these endeavors. We've really enjoyed having you on.
I enjoyed being here.
It's been great, Dr. Oller. Thank you
very
coming
much.
on. Dr. Jeremy Oller, an economist at UCO. We'll be right back with more on The Verdict.
There are now 11 million of us who live here and work here. I was 15 when I came here 6 years ago. I raised my family here, drive my truck to my job every day. The only difference between now and 6 years ago I do it legally. I wanted to. Because this is my home.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we've tried to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, wrapping up a show with economist Dr. Jeremy Oller. As he said, call him Jeremy.
Yeah. Well, it was good to have Jeremy on. I've worked with him over the years and have known him well since he was a pup. He was a student of mine. And he is recognized, as I indicated in the opening, as a rising star in this field. And it's fun to see his development over the years from just as a student to doing some bag carrying for other economists, and now he's got people carrying his bags, and I might say he really does well with it. He is an excellent testifying expert.
And when you're dealing with regulated industries, there's always opportunities to second guess, because it's all a little bit of a guesswork going in and coming out.
Well, and once the jury has decided, it's a guesswork trying to figure out what they decided.
Well, we enjoyed having him on the show today. We enjoyed having you with us as well. We'll be back next week with another show of The Verdict. But till then, I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people on The Verdict. We'll see you next time.